what is the Trump administration doing? What is the Trump strategy here? Because I think for a lot of people, even very smart people that I interact with on social media, they think that they're just making it up as they go along. There's no logic to it. How do you see it?
Okay, so this is a conversation with Mike Schellenberger on the right there and Rob Atkinson on the left. Mike Schellenberger over there wearing his weird underwater goggles. Welcome to John Mike Keene. This is a fascinating conversation on how all these elite intellectuals think Trump is dumb. And we know that he's doing some wise things, and these guys talk about his wise things. Please watch this with me. And I'm only bringing the show to you because I kind of like you.
So the fact that Krugman could say that just shows the hubris of these people, the hubris of these people. So there's two kinds of people who didn't like the kind of past phase of globalization. There were the protectionists. I heard you mentioned you were protesting in Seattle kind of thing a long time ago. There were those kind of people. They just didn't like globalization. They wanted to protect their domestic firms. Okay. So I can see why we can dismiss them, but clearly global integration is important. Then there are other people like myself, like ITIF, like lots of really, I think, smart people who said, wait a minute, globalization is important, but the system that has evolved no longer works the right way. It has to be fixed. It has to be reformed. And we've said this for now 15 years. And Krugman and his ilk have ignored the critics. They've not only ignored them, but they've mocked them as morons, as simpletons.
So does it sound familiar? So that's been 15 years that we've been aware that the global economy system has been broken. It doesn't work. It is done. And everyone knows it has to be fixed. Trump is coming in following a playbook by this Moran guy, and it's being fixed. And then all they can do is call him names because they're so dumb, they don't understand the lay of the land, that the system is broken.
I'm serious. If you don't buy into the whole hog of there's no protectionism, and they actually believe, and I swear to God, they say, I've heard them say this, that one-sided free trade is better than not. So in other words, if the other side's cheating, it's in our interest to have no barriers. So anyway, the point is there's been over a decade, people who've written about this, people who've talked about it, people who've raised the issues. And so Krugman's either being disingenuous or he's so ideological, he just writes these people off as nutcases. So here's what Trump is trying to do. Number one, he's rightly saying that the post-war till really 10 years ago, U.S. trade and globalization policy put foreign interest ahead of U.S. interests from an economic perspective. Now, the reason we did that is we thought that our global interests of being the global policeman, making sure there was democracy, all of the things, we thought that was the most important thing, and that we were so strong we could sacrifice our techno-economic interests. That's a good debate. It wasn't like these people were stupid or anything like that. In some ways, they weren't selling out America. They were selling out part of America. In other words, our ability to be competitive.
Okay. This is in defense of George H.W. Bush in the early 90s when we first went global. We said it would be a trade that we thought it's similar to the nation building we did after the Iraq War under Bush II, where we said we can spread democracy. That is, China will become more democratic if we're willing to sacrifice it. All it'll cost us is our technology and our manufacturing. But it was a good intention. It was very naive and very stupid in hindsight.
But they thought it was a worthy goal because they wanted us to rule the world. And the way you do that is you give other countries all these deals. So Trump's 100% right when he says that. That's what we've been doing. And the result was that there are problems. Now, Krugman has written, as have Fareed Zakaria, you name it, that we don't need manufacturing. And this is the most nonsensical thing you can say. I was talking, or a colleague of mine, my old editor, told me one time, he was talking to the head, I can't say who it was because it was a private conversation, but I believe to the head of the largest, most important international policy think tank in Washington. And he asked the president or the director, he said, how much manufacturing do you think we could really lose in America and still be okay? He goes, really? How much? He goes, yeah, how much? He goes, all of it. Car rental, car production, potato chips, computer chips. You can laugh or be bewildered, but I swear to God, that is how these people think.
And explain more how they, but just because we're making a criticism of people for not being properly empathic. What is the logic there? How does that make sense to them? Yeah.
Look, this is worth $1 and I import it or I produce it. And this high-tech thing's worth $1. The market is all knowing. The market values these each at $1. There are no, quote, externalities. So who are we to interfere with the market wisdom? $1 is $1. That's really what they think. Now, there's so many people who've been smart and really look at this, and Paul Romer, endogenous growth theory, all that. There's so many failures with that. And the most important failure is you can't defend your country on movies and T-shirts and things. You have to be able to make advanced technology products.
Okay, that's the rub, is they thought that we would be able to protect our country with what he said, movies and T-shirts. That is, that culturally, we would win everything in technology or manufacturing, factories. Let's not be protectionist of those, the Rust Belt jobs, steelworking, coal mining. Let's offshore all that to their cheap slave labor in China or Saudi Arabia or, whoever's willing to do it. And we'll do Hollywood movies. Is what's America. And you end up weakening yourself because you can't defend yourself.
And most of those are what are called dual use. There maybe a company makes an electronic part for the Defense Department, but they make most of their parts for the civilian market, which is why they can make them cheap for the Defense Department. So the idea that we could be a non-industrialized country and have any sort of global power is nonsensical. The second thing is that if we didn't have any manufacturing, the trade deficit would be massive, because we would be importing all of our goods, right? We run a trade surplus in services, but we run a big, giant trade deficit in goods. Now, in their model, we don't need any manufacturing. So that means the trade deficit goes up to maybe 2.5 trillion instead of 1 trillion. Now, ultimately, that's not sustainable. So what would happen? The dollar would have to crash. Now, think about what that's like for the typical American. No more foreign vacations. You pay an enormous amount for your imports now, your food imports, everything else, because the dollar would have to fall so much. So anyways, that's the reason why we have to have manufacturing. The second mistake these people made, which is even more egregious to me, even more unethical, is they would simply say, yeah, we need some of them would say, okay, I'll acknowledge your point. We need manufacturing, but U.S. manufacturing is bigger than it's ever been. What's the problem? I won't go into all the details of measurement and all that stuff, but it simply is not. If you look at the official government statistics from the Department of Commerce, you have to look at what's called value added, real value added. In other words, of course, manufacturing is big because we've had inflation and the GDP and this population is growing. What you have to do is you have to look at how much real manufacturing do we have as a share of GDP. And what you find is that it's dropped dramatically.
And it's also dropped in farming, in all these old kind of muscular forms of manufacturing, that all fell. What they're counting as manufacturing, going, we have plenty of manufacturing. They're talking about like even high-tech widgets and things that are not the same as us getting control, say, of our own food canning and processing operations. Anyways, I thought this was a fascinating conversation. Thought I'd try something different on the channel. Let me know if you like it in the comments below. I'm John Mike Keene.